Hello and welcome to Capital Connection with me, Kamran Yousaf. It is a show where we discuss issues that dominate Pakistan's national scene. Like always, let me first introduce my panelists. We have with us in the studios Mr. Javed Rana. He is a senior journalist and political analyst. Mr. Wasim Abbasi, he is also senior journalist, currently writes for the News International. And last but not the least, we have with us Mr. Khurram Shehzad. He is also senior journalist, writes for both local and international media outlets. Many thanks to all of you for joining us tonight on the program. So after a prolonged deadlock between the government and opposition parties over the appointment of chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, the government today accepted the demand of opposition parties to appoint leader of the opposition in the National Assembly as head of the Public Accounts Committee. The announcement was made by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in the National Assembly, and he said that the government took this decision in the larger interest of democracy. This is a significant development because the lingering stalemate on this issue has virtually hampered the legislative business in the National Assembly since PTI assumed power in August. So has the government really taken a wise decision? So Mr. Javed Rana, how do you see it? Because not long ago, Prime Minister Imran Khan, during interaction with some of the anchors, stated very categorically that he will never ever accept Shehbaz Sharif as head of the Public Accounts Committee. But now the government has taken a U-turn, and even Ayaz Sadiq said that this is a positive U-turn taken by the government.
I think the government is learning on the job. They don't have experience, and this is obviously yet another U-turn. And I think the politics of
Pakistan, is it a positive U-turn?
I don't think it's a positive U-turn. You say in a broader picture, the journalists and the people are now getting used to these U-turns, and we don't find it surprising. The trouble with Prime Minister Imran Khan is that he moves from one extreme to another extreme. He sometimes starts appreciating, acknowledging people's services to another extreme, and then maybe after a couple of days it's the other way around. And similarly, I think in case of Shehbaz Sharif, this is a decision they could have had 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 weeks ago, and there was no point of making such a bombshell statement that at no cost he would be made chairman of PAC. I don't understand that politics, and I think the quality of the advice that the Prime Minister is getting, that's a pretty poor, because it doesn't create a positive impression among people about the leadership. When he talks that it is a quality of a leadership to take U-turn, I think the Prime Minister is forgetting what does it mean of U-turn in the dictionary. It's a negative terminology. It's not a positive terminology.
But let me take the discussion forward, because of this deadlock, we know that there was no legislative business going on in the National Assembly since the PTI government took charge in August. So at the end of the day, government was left with no other option, because joint opposition parties took a very strong position that they will not accept anyone other than Shehbaz Sharif as head of the Public Accounts Committee. So being the ruling party, don't you think that the government has a major responsibility, and that's why at the end of the day they took the right decision? They could have done it earlier, but at least that now they have taken the right decision.
I think it's as you said, it's a positive U-turn, and it's a right decision. It is motivated by political expediency. Obviously, they know that they have to do it because the legislative business, as you said, is totally hampered. Right now, I think they never passed a single legislative piece apart from the finance bill since coming to power.
Because that was necessity.
That was a necessity, and still they are feeling, there is a pressure that in Senate they don't have majority, and they still have to appease opposition further to be able to get through Senate and to pass some legislative business. And also, I think it's a good move for overall democracy in Pakistan and the parliamentary business, because now the committees will be formed. There are around 30 plus business committees, and the opposition will be given some committees, and the government is getting around 16 committees. So I think this will move Parliament forward, and this will enhance the trust of the people in the Parliament. I think it's a good move in the end of the day.
Do you think, Khurram, this is also a case of internal division within Tehreek-e-Insaf, because we know that there are leaders or politicians within the PTI who really in favor of taking a tough stance towards opposition. We know, people like Information Minister and even Murad Saeed, who from day one said that Shehbaz Sharif should not be made as head of the Public Accounts Committee. On the other hand, what we saw today in the National Assembly, people like Shah Mahmood Qureshi always sounded very reconciliatory, and it appears that he was the one who convinced Prime Minister that look, that we have to concede to the opposition on this thing. Do you think that this is the case of a battle between hawks and doves within the ruling party?
I don't think this is like that. I think that this is an overall strategy of PTI, because if you know Imran Khan personally, he likes to attack. And if you recall the first session of Assembly, the opposition started attacking PTI from the day one. So in retaliation, Imran Khan stood up on his seat and he said that there will be no NRO and I'll take them to task and everything. So I mean, in my view, they are tackling the opposition really well. And
do you think that he took that personally? Because when he was elected as Prime Minister, obviously this was for the first time that he was any Prime Minister was not allowed to give a speech without any protest. Do you think that he took that personally when opposition really made hue and cry on his maiden speech in the National Assembly?
Exactly. I mean, this is your inauguration day, and the Prime Minister has been elected, and he is going to address the House, and you expect some good things from him. And before he speaks, you create a situation in which you put him on defensive. And a person like Imran Khan, we all have been seeing him since decades. So I think he retaliated, and from that position, they went on and they built more aggression. And I personally think, I may be wrong, but I think this is a well-crafted strategy by the government that put the opposition at bay and attack them as much you can.
But the issue is that this kind of policy is not sustainable in the long run, because today Shah Mahmood Qureshi said that they have drafted certain legislations that will benefit the common man. And for legislation, obviously you need the support of opposition parties, and first you also need the standing committees where the law is vetted and debated. So the government in that sense is really in a tight corner. Okay, fine that they wanted to attack the opposition, but that policy in the long run is not sustainable.
I think what Imran Khan has himself said, citing his wife, that he has been in an opposition mode, the fact that he has struggled as an opposition leader for 22 years. So obviously it will take time, and I think now the genuine political sense seems to be prevailing. And I agree with your assessment, and probably there is a division within the PTI. Those who are experienced hands like Shah Mahmood Qureshi, they don't want to take the fight to a tipping point, as we have seen over the last couple of weeks. And the parliament had virtually become dysfunctional, and they needed opposition's cooperation on, particularly at least on a PSC they could have given in. And then the manner with which the government has been justifying every act of NAB, that has created an impression that, and also there are allegations of the opposition, that somewhere some sort of nexus is there. They are defending the kind of the jargon, the choice of the words that they make, that the opposition is seeking NRO, which obviously mean some sort of secret deal. That actually, I think, has created an impression, giving justification to what opposition has been saying, that there is some nexus. But nonetheless, I think the problems for the government and the opposition are far from over. There are cases pending with the courts. There is a pending investigation with the NAB. We don't know what's going to happen with that investigation. But so far, what we know through media, it seems that perhaps there is not a solid evidence with the NAB against Shehbaz Sharif. And they have arrested him apparently without solid evidence. In case of other members of the PMLN, Khwaja Saad Rafiq, I think they are probably relying upon an approver, his eyewitness account, his admission. Now, it doesn't mean that they are not involved in any kind of corruption. Here it is a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is the white collar crimes.
We will talk about the bigger picture because obviously Shehbaz Sharif did talk about it, and he even openly offered that if any corruption of a single penny is proved against him, he would certainly resign from politics forever, and he seems very confident. We will continue our discussion, but after this short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Capital Connection, and we are discussing the breakthrough between the government and opposition parties over the appointment of Public Accounts Committee chairman. Now, the government accepted the demand of opposition parties to appoint Shehbaz Sharif as head of the Public Accounts Committee. So, Mr. Wasim Abbasi, there were two major concerns of Tehreek-e-Insaf regarding the appointment of Shehbaz Sharif as head of the Public Accounts Committee. One, that he is facing investigations before the National Accountability Bureau, and second, that how could he actually oversee the audit of his own government, because as you know that previously PMLN was in power. Do you think that these are legitimate concerns of Tehreek-e-Insaf? Because Shah Mahmood Qureshi maintained that while they have accepted the opposition demand in the larger interest of democracy, but at the same time their political or principal position on this issue remains the same.
Well, about one allegation that Shehbaz Sharif is facing NAB probe, the probe is still going on, and as Javed Rana Sahab has mentioned, nothing has so far been proven. He is not a convicted person, so this is not a legitimate concern. But on the other hand, they do have a point when they talk about the last government. The last government was headed by his elder brother, Shehbaz Sharif's elder brother Nawaz Sharif. So obviously they have a point, but this point was negated in KP. They have appointed their own person, one of the PTI person as head of the PAC in KP. So there is no point saying
their argument that in the rules of business in KPK, the Speaker of the Provincial Assembly is actually heads the Public Accounts Committee. So they say that they are bound by the law or the business.
Then again, there was a tradition in National Assembly also that they always appoint the opposition leader as the Public Accounts Committee head. And also I think they have created a space for the accountability of the last government by appointing a subcommittee. A subcommittee will be heading the cases regarding the last government. So, and the subcommittee will be headed by a PTA member. So I think they still have a space to actually make the last government accountable. But
and I think this was offered by the opposition parties that look, that if you have reservations that Shehbaz Sharif should not oversee the audit paras related to the PMLN government, they can have a subcommittee headed by the PTI guy. And do you think that this is a perfect way out in a way?
Yes, I think this is the actual way out in this situation. While government was taking a stand and the opposition was taking another stand, opposition was not in a mood to withdraw their candidate. So I personally think this came from Pakistan People's Party, but whoever proposed it, I think it is the only way out.
And do you think that this, because both Shah Mahmood Qureshi and Shehbaz Sharif sounded very reconciliatory, because given the fact that over the last few weeks we saw what happened in the National Assembly, heated exchanges between the ruling and the opposition members. Do you think that this could lead to some kind of arrangement or a working relationship between the government and opposition parties?
Yes, actually what I was saying earlier is that the government took opposition to some stage that they forced them to accept what they want. So now when they are reaching to a consensus on this issue, in future opposition will keep this in mind, that if we will be aggressive, the government will be aggressive too. So I mean, both of the parties have to run the house, so both have to cooperate with each other. So I think at the end, I mean, they say if it ends well, everything is fine when it ends well. So I think it's okay.
But I would beg to differ, because I think it's the other way around. The government has to come to terms with the opposition's demand, and they have to concede. So it's not the victory of government to actually bring opposition on negotiation table. They have lost nothing.
But of course that they can take the high moral ground now that look that we have appointed leader of the opposition despite reservation as head of the Public Accounts Committee, because Shah Mahmood Qureshi also conceded that he told the Prime Minister that if we appoint PTI guy as head of the Apex Committee of the National Assembly, that would not send a right message to the outside world. So in that sense, PTI can take the high moral ground that look that despite reservations, we have appointed a leader of the opposition as head of the Public Accounts Committee.
I think there was already troubles inside the parliament because of ongoing investigation against the mainstream opposition leaders, against Asif Zardari, against Shehbaz Sharif, Saad Rafiq. And then there was this lingering issue of PAC committee chairman. And for the government, I think it was a relatively lesser difficult option. Only thing that had to happen was another U-turn, which they have conveniently taken. And now I think the tussle between the opposition and the government is not going to go over with this appointment, because there are serious cases against Shehbaz Sharif and Saad Rafiq, and they are not going to settle down in any time soon. And now the trouble with the PTI is they had taken the anti-corruption campaign during the election, and also I would say for last over a decade, that they cannot retract themselves all of a sudden. It will take time. What a Prime Minister needs to understand that the world of law is altogether different than the political domain. In the politics, you can say anything, but when it comes to the courts and when it comes to the application of law, then it has to be driven by the hard evidence. Now, the trouble with PMLN is that if they are facing the court right now, it doesn't mean they were not indulged in any corruption. It means they are upset that there is a little evidence that they left behind, and nonetheless they are behind the bar, because the kind of the mechanism.
So you were suggesting that they might have committed financial corruption, but they didn't leave enough evidence for authorities to prove against.
Exactly, because when they cancelled that housing projects, then they had a sort of arrangement with the contractor, a mutual arrangement, which is, I think, legally a strong point for the accused in this particular case.
So in a way you are endorsing the PTI's position that look that the previous governments, both led by Nawaz Sharif and Asif Ali Zardari, they committed massive corruption. In that way you are endorsing the PTI's position.
Yes, I endorse that position, but there is a trouble. The trouble is you can politically say it is the case, but do you have a prosecutable evidence? And that is where the real problem is, because the kind of the legal structure these political parties, particularly PMLN,
so
they put in place.
Prosecution is not the responsibility of the accused. So in that sense, accused will always take the benefit. Do you share that view that look that PMLN or People's Party might have done certain wrongdoings, but they were clever enough not to leave the trail of evidence that allow the prosecution to successfully put them behind the bars or ensure conviction?
But unfortunately, we are governed by a law, so we have to go by the law. Even if they have committed something, we have to prove it in the court of law. And it's not, they have troubles. PTI has all kind of troubles with their claims and the figures. They always dole out figures like $30,000 billion, $70 trillion.
No, but in that case, how the PTI would justify its position? For example, let's assume if Shehbaz Sharif at the end of the day is acquitted and there are no clear evidence against him, even Nawaz Sharif is acquitted, then both these gentlemen would claim that look that nothing has proved against us. How would then PTI say or claim that the way they were saying that these guys have looted the national wealth, but they were acquitted by the court? Then
they are never short of excuses, Kamran. We have seen that. And they will say that, well, they were smart enough, they were clever enough not to leave behind traces of corruption and whatever crimes they have committed. So they will say, oh, well, we tried our best to prosecute them, but we've actually, because of the lacunas in the law and the system, they managed to get away with their crimes. So the excuses are no problem. They can always take U-turns, and then they have.
What do you think? Do you think that this is? How do you see it? Because at the moment it appears that PMLN, maybe half of the PMLN leadership is corrupt. Even People's Party is also facing the music. Do you think that at the end of the day, NAB authorities or whatever, whoever is investigating, will successfully also prosecute them? Because our history is not very positive in that sense, because NAB authorities and others really pick up the people, but at the end of the day, those people are acquitted by the court because prosecution failed to prove cases against them.
I think it is it is not easy to say that both these brothers will be convicted. There are chances, there are strong chances that they will get away with it, as my both friends said, that they might have done something, but there is no clear proof. So they may get away with it. But the thing is, there is another angle to this story, which is that I don't think this is PTI or NAB to decide that what to do with them. There is another force in this country who may have to decide that what to do with whom. So the things will be moved from that very force.
So you are again indicating about the possibility of NRO maybe?
Maybe NRO, maybe no NRO. It will depend on the situation.
We'll talk about this aspect as well, because according to Shehbaz Sharif, there is a nexus between the PTI government and, of course, the National Accountability Bureau, and that's why these cases are being framed against the opposition members, including the PMLN politician. But of course, PTI denied all these allegations, saying that NAB is working independently. But as Mr. Khurram Shehzad pointed out, that there may be a third force who is controlling the NAB. So is there a third force? We will talk about it after this short break. Welcome back. You're watching Capital Connection, and we are discussing the current political situation and, of course, the big story of the day, the breakthrough between the government and opposition parties regarding the appointment of Public Accounts Committee chairman. But before the break, we were talking about that who would decide the fate of whatever is happening with the opposition parties. Do you think that NAB would decide, PTI would decide, or as Mr. Khurram pointed out, that there may be a third force who will ultimately decide the political future of PMLN leaders?
Well, let me take you back to the PMLN government when there was a judgment of the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said there is a death of NAB. These remarks were made before the judgment.
Very damning indictment.
And then in the judgment they said that since the government has managed to control all the state institutions who were supposed to investigate the Prime Minister and his family, so we are left with no option but to set up an independent JIT. At that time, the NAB was a toothless body. Now, its situation slightly has improved, but the impression that there is still a selective accountability is gaining grounds. That is extremely important. But let me just catch up.
Is this a perception, or do you think that there is a reality also? That NAB is selective in accountability?
This perception is based on reality, because I think if this perception has to be neutralized, that can be done. To begin with, there should be trial of General Pervez Musharraf on corruption charges, because there are plenty proof against him pending with the NAB. And the NAB has practically done nothing on it. And there are plausible evidence against it.
But who is controlling the NAB? If let's assume for a while, is it a third force, or they are taking orders from the PTI government?
I think to begin with, the NAB is getting full support from the government for very obvious reason. NAB is completely synced with the government. I'm not saying it in any negative context. They are getting all kind of the cooperation that a state institution should get. But I think there are also, we have already heard the allegation from the opposition, some sort of nexus. Trouble is why NAB is not taking up those cases so actively against the government leaders, and that is where the real problem lies. And I think it will only end by pursuing those cases actively. Not just after maybe 2 or 3 months there is one reference against one particular leader of a ruling party, and then for next 4 or 5 months you don't find anything in the news. So I think beyond news, NAB needs to be very proactive. And I think then when we talk with the big fish, there comes the General Pervez Musharraf. they need to take up that case. They need to fully investigate that case.
But I think it remains to be seen. Some people say that the original sin committed by the ousted Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was to his efforts to try the former military ruler, and even this question was posed to Prime Minister Imran Khan, and he said that he would look into his case, and he was not really ready to give a categorical answer that whether he was really interested in holding Musharraf accountable, whatever he has done with the constitution or otherwise. So let's take the discussion forward. How do you think the NAB or the government can dispel that impression? Because, as I said, there is a strong perception. Even Shehbaz Sharif has pointed out that look, that his case and even Malan Jabba case, where certain PTI leaders were being questioned, both were framed in January. And look, that I am in jail, but NAB has done little when it comes to investigation regarding Malan Jabba. Do you think that he has a genuine concern, or NAB has his own priorities?
I think it's a genuine concern, and NAB has to prove that it is a body that actually goes against all leaders regardless of their political affiliation, but we have not seen that so far. There are cases against Zulfi Bukhari, who is the Prime Minister's advisor. There are cases against Salim Khan. There are cases against our defense minister, and there are other leaders.
And even
from the
Prime Minister Imran Khan is facing investigation.
Also helicopter misuse case also he is facing. So, and NAB has done little to prove that it is a body that is impartial. None of the government leaders has been arrested so far, and NAB has shown extraordinary interest in the opposition leaders.
A structural problem, because as Mr. Javed Saab also pointed out, that when NAB during PMLN's time, it was like a toothless body, and also Supreme Court gave a damning indictment. Do you think that NAB always acts as a toothless body when they pursue cases against the ruling party or the government? They always target the opposition party. Is this a structural problem, or the government has so much control over these bodies?
I think it's a structural problem. The last government also failed to introduce reforms in NAB law, and it was absolutely a toothless body under the PMLN government also. It was, we have seen cases against Shehbaz Sharif and Nawaz Sharif quashed during 2013 also. So it is true, and we have heard Chairman NAB saying that whenever we move against any government minister, the government impose some funding cuts on NAB. So because of these structural problems, NAB is in fact directly controlled by the government, if we admit it or not. So they are not that eager to
mantra of across the board accountability. Do you think that remains a myth in this country? Because it is easier to target opposition. The real test is when actually you challenge someone sitting in the government.
Yes, exactly, and your job is to challenge everybody who you think he or she is a corrupt, and I think this is a big failure of NAB, and this is a big loophole in the NAB, that they are not not putting the government personalities on trial. So ideally, even the Prime Minister Imran Khan, who claims to be a clean man and an honest person, actually he should encourage all the accountability authorities to take to task all his people who are corrupt, or I mean the people who have been alleged for doing corruption. So until and unless they do this, there will always be a question mark on them.
Though we know that Prime Minister Imran Khan in his first speech said that accountability process will start from the government first. So do you think that he is now backtracking from that promise?
I don't think he is backtracking from that promise. I think he is not that serious on that issue. I mean there is some sort of personality flaw with Imran Khan. Like he says something else and he acts something else. Like in Swati case, I mean Wasim Abbasi did a wonderful job. He reported really well that case. I mean, if I am Imran Khan, I would take action on very first day, and I'll ask him to resign. But he did not. He waited for so long, and at the end he has to do this. But I think he should have done it on the very first day.
But still, I think there is debate. Even some people say that corruption is not Pakistan's number one problem. Today, Finance Minister Asad Umar said that if you talk to the common man, they always remind us that when you are going to put thieves behind the bars, But he said the other day he had a meeting with some business personalities, executive elites, and he told me that why don't you tell Prime Minister to stop harping on corruption and let's move on. So he said that there is a clear divide. So do you think that corruption is indeed our number one problem?
I think I don't think corruption is the number one problem. For me, perhaps there is an altogether different issue, and that is enforced disappearances. I think that is number one problem in Pakistan.
Again, that is related to the rule of law.
But again, that is a different debate. We should not go. We are not going to get into this. But corruption, there has to be a crackdown on corrupt elements in a manner that it does not create impression there is a witch hunt or there is a selective accountability. Unfortunately, that is happening. But the over focus of PTI's government on corruption at the same time is also sending negative messages to the investors. And that is a problem.
So the business community is giving the wise advice to Asad Umar that look, that move beyond, this mantra of fighting corruption.
All this government needs to do is to speak less in the parliament and outside the parliament on how do they want to handle corruption. They should not take the burden of the mess that NAB has created over the period of time. The government should stay straight that we have got nothing to do with what NAB is doing, and government should restrict itself in backing up the NAB in terms of providing funds, in terms of providing institutional support, in terms of providing them manpower. They need good investigators to probe so many cases.
But the dilemma for the government is because they won the election based on this anti-corruption drive, and certainly they would like to take credit if there are big fish caught in corruption. We'll continue our discussion after the break. Our discussion will continue, and we will talk about another aspect. Shehbaz Sharif also said that they are go extra mile to support the government, and he even talked about charter of economy. He's offered the government that let's have a charter of economy because Pakistan's economy is facing precarious situation. So we will discuss this aspect after this short break. Welcome back. You're watching Capital Connection, and now we will talk about in a way the olive branch extended by a leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, that they are willing to go extra mile to support the government, and he has also offered them to have a charter of economy. So how significant that statement on part of Shehbaz Sharif, because everybody agrees that Pakistan facing number of challenges, and the most immediate one, of course, is on the economic front. And there are certain issues where you need bipartisan consensus. Do you believe that the government will certainly take this offer from Shehbaz Sharif seriously, that let's have a charter of economy, all parties should sit across the table and have minimum consensus on this very important issue?
I'm not sure what the government will do, but I think it's a very good offer, and the government badly needs this, because I have seen they are struggling on economic front. They're struggling with the strategy and the economic policy. So far they have failed to bring any relief to the people and show any positive direction of economy.
Because
the investors
have
have no
inherited
confidence
all the
in
problems from the previous government, because this is their
but they
argument.
have actually multiplied these problems with their policies and with their speaking. They have to speak less and act more, but they have failed to do so, and they have created a perception. Market is driven by perception, economy is driven by perception. They have created a perception that economy is not their priority, or they are not well versed with how economy is moved in the country. So I think they badly need advice, and they badly need to focus on economy instead of corruption mantra. So corruption was okay for winning the elections, but now they have moved to work, and they have to bring relief in the lives of the people through economic reforms, and so far they have failed. I think they were trying to convince Miftah Ismail. He is the economic wizard of the last government, and they were trying to convince him to join PTI so that they have a wise economic advisor. So far their economic team has shown very dismal results.
Is it a possibility that we can have a charter we know that we have a charter of democracy, but charter of economy, do you think that there is a possibility, given Prime Minister Imran Khan's aggressive posturing towards opposition parties, any such arrangement is possible?
I think it is difficult to say that it is possible, at least now. Imran Khan may take 2 months to go to this point, as it took 2 months to make Shehbaz Sharif chairman of Public Accounts Committee. So I think I don't think they will easily accept this.
How do you think? Because one of the problems that politicians often take the blame from the third force, that look, that when they are given the opportunity, they always waste time, they don't use their brains. So in that sense, both the government and opposition benches have a responsibility. So in that sense, do you think that the government or the PTI should take this offer very seriously? Because you have a serious economic problem and you have to deal with so many issues, that let's have minimum consensus on some of the economic challenges that Pakistan is facing.
I think the manner with which all political parties have been taking the foreign policy issues seriously, by and large, all political parties have consensus on in what manner Pakistan should handle foreign and defense policy. But on economy, that consensus is not there. Government must accept the offer of Shehbaz Sharif, because economy is playing a key role, and it is very much linked with our defense and the foreign policy. And this is the high time, because it's a good beginning by appointing a chairman of PAC, and they should move onwards. You see, if they don't do it, then I think again they will have the similar problems. By and large, the policy of the previous government and this government are going to be not very different in its manifestation. Now there are intentions, which always matters, and unfortunately if there are less political intention at the end of the tenure, that is going to give a good boost to the economy. PMLN played havoc with the economy in the last year of the government, and I really fear that this government may follow the footstep of the PMLN in the last years of its tenure.
No, but Shehbaz Sharif was claiming that, look, that they have taken certain steps. For example, the energy crisis, that it was because of PMLN's policies that they addressed, because when they took over, everybody was complaining about the extended power outages, and they did address that energy shortages.
That's right. But again, the trouble is there are serious allegations against the PMLN government on in what manner they allegedly siphoned off money from big projects, from development projects. That is a problematic area. If there is a charter of economy, there has to be certain clauses of those economy, how to make it sure that there is no element of corruption in the mega projects, which unfortunately was the case during the previous government.
But the government at least can start negotiating with the opposition parties, because at some point in time, even on the economic issues, you need legislation, certain structural issues that you need to address. So in that sense, do you think that the government should really seriously think about it, or do you think that PTI, the way they are on the high moral pedestal ground, they may not like to sit with people like Shehbaz Sharif, because they have this certain ego issues, because they took certain position and they have created this perception that, look, these people are actually looted Pakistan's national wealth?
Well, it's hard to predict policies of PTI, we have seen that, but I think it will be wise for them to actually take them into confidence about the economic policy and take them on board about some legislative reforms, for example, for improving tax net, FBR reforms about the exports, and how to decrease exports, increase exports and decrease imports, and increase foreign remittances. On so many issues, they are failing right now, and they need help from any quarters, and opposition's help should be welcomed, and they have controls and checks and balances over.
But the problem is that they blamed the opposition parties for this mess. So if their recipe was right, then why would they why would they seek help from the same same party whose own policies actually failed, according to the PTI?
Well, I don't think the PTI was right in their claims, but they can develop some mechanism like a committee where PTI is in majority, but they can get a better advice from the opposition in the committee and still take credit for any reforms that comes out of.
One final comment. It appears that on the Public Accounts Committee thing, the saner voices within the PTI prevailed. Do you think that in the long run, those voices will still have their say, because they have to run this parliamentary business smoothly, because this is their responsibility?
Yeah, I think we should always hope hope, and I think the senior voices exist in Parliament, and I think they will play their role. And fortunately, they exist in every party. So let's hope that it will go smoothly.
Okay, that's it, Mr. Javed Rana, Mr. Wasim Abbasi, and Mr. Khurram Shahzad. That's it from this edition of Capital Connection. Thanks for watching.